some quick announcements and then I will turn it over. I guess we got a couple of polling questions to get out of the way and then I will turn it over to Heather. So welcome to our third session. Today we are covering financial management. We've got 2 more sessions and then hopefully you guys saw the emails this morning. We scheduled a supplemental session on Wednesday, the 16th for a short period, not a formal session, but just to do some Q&A to follow up on some of the insurance related issues associated with the law stuff that we talked about for the first session. So Kristen, if you can pop in the chat, there's a different Zoom link for that one, so you got to register for that one. So that is the new thing happening there. And then this is just the slate of today's speakers and contributors. We've got a full agenda today, but you'll be hearing from everybody. You'll hear a little bit about their background for each of their sections, but wanted to recognize Kristen Maurer from Baker Tilly. She's been the one that's been organizing and coordinating everything. So thank you, Kristen, for all your work there. And then I don't know if Heather is on yet, but Heather will be moderating for us. So she'll be covering and kind of being our, ringmaster, ringleader, I forget what the right word is, but taking us through all the different issues. So looking forward to today's session. And then this is just a quick agenda. This is what we're hoping to kind of stick with respect to the time. So if you want to take a break, we're planning for around 5:10 Pacific and 6:10 Pacific as well. As I had mentioned in one of the emails this morning, everybody local can come to our October events. So Kristen's going to put this information in the chat. We do have our South of San Francisco pod event coming up next Tuesday. So folks who want to come to that, the registration information is in the chat. And we'll put this up during the second break so folks can look at the other events that are happening. And then I did want to make sure we acknowledge all of our strategic partners. We are not able to do what we do without them. In particular, Baker Tilly and Kristen. You'll be hearing from Dan from Wells Fargo. So thanks to them. And then Robert Half as well has been very involved with this session. JP Morgan, Aon, CBRE, Insperity, and BMO. And then finally, housekeeping. Hopefully you guys saw all 3 of the emails this morning. Just keep checking for emails kind of every week as we continue to update you guys. If you have any questions, you can email me or Delite. In the email earlier, I had included information on the Bootcamp directory. So in particular, the resources section there is a good place for you to go for the videos, the presentation decks, everything for each of the sessions. So go to that if you missed a session and you can catch up. And then let's see, Kristen, if you're going to pop in the chat, we have another survey for today. So if you guys can grab that, we're going to raffle off another Starbucks gift card and we'll announce the winner later. We'll get the number later. And then today we have 11 polling questions. So if for some reason you have a problem getting your answers in, email Delite and she'll make sure you get credit for that. So I think with that, we can do boot camper intros. We can do Roy, Sandy, and James. And then after the break, we've got Patty, Rohit, and Craig. And then after the break, Matt. And then Sonia, are you up for doing an intro? I know we had asked last week, but
yep,
we can do it. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay. So I think with that, let me take down the slides. And Roy, if you can do your intro, a minute or less for everybody.
Yep, I think I can do that. So Roy Moorfield, CPA. My background through the CPA world was tax and then M&A. Based near Boulder, Colorado, and the CFO for a company called Cozy that does portable plug and play energy storage systems that tend to be station specific. So if you would take one maybe to your home office and plug things in, so you'd have backup power. Same thing for a refrigerator. And superpower, none of us like calling it that, but I'm pretty good with organization and process.
Gotcha. Okay, that's great, Roy. Thank you. And what number boot camp is this for you?
I think it's 3.
Oh wow. Okay, I think maybe you win. You win with the number of boot camps. Thank you. We appreciate it, Roy. Glad that you're back with us. Okay, let's see. Sandy, can you do your intro? There you are.
Hi, everyone.
So I'm a finance director with 12 plus years, specifically in FP&A. I was last with First Republic Bank, and mostly did a lot of corporate finance, corporate strategy, managing a team there. I started off my career over at Charles Schwab, and that's how I got into FEI through Glenn Snyder. So it's my first boot camp, and I'm really interested in just learning about or kind of refreshing a lot of things that I've kind of did in my job experience. Yes, my superpower is yeah, almost very similar. Just like to lead initiatives, really looking at structure, scaling, and also process improvement, and things like that.
Great, thanks, Sandy. It's good to have you. All right, and last for this round, James, are you there? Where's James?
I'm here.
There you go. Okay, go for it.
Hey, everybody. James Tanaka, Senior Director of Finance at Neurona Therapeutics. Been here for about 3.5 years. Started my career at Arthur Andersen when it was still around. Was there for about 4 years until the unfortunate collapse. But that was a good experience overall, not the collapse part, but everything else in between. And I really worked my way up through accounting and finance, and really like small companies where I get to have my hands in both accounting and finance and really building up the company itself and processes. So my one superpower is really finding fun ways to use Excel. And so when I was on the board of Little League in Millbrae, I created an Excel file to help with the player evaluations and the draft. And if anybody is familiar with NFL draft, the next team up, right, they're on the clock, or they're making their pick. So as it calculates who's the next team to make a pick, they're on the clock. And then of being baseball, of course, the next team after that is on deck. So it recalculates every single time a player is picked on a team, and then everybody has fun with that. And we spend about 3 hours chit-chatting, and some of that is picking teams.
That's so awesome. We could have used that in Pacifica. Darn. You should spread that around. The district.
Yeah.
District 52 needs you.
Yeah, I'll send you the file.
There you go, James. Yeah, I'm an ex-Arthur Andersen alum too, so that's funny. Good deal. All right, so removing the spotlight, and then before we turn it over to Heather, we got to get rid of 3 pesky polling questions. So let me just get those on the screen here. Give me 1 second. We're going to do 3 polling questions. Okay, and then we're going to do 1 at a time. So give me 1 second here. Okay. Kristen, can you read the polling question?
Sure. Okay, so everybody, how many team members do you currently manage? Or if you're in transition in your last full-time role?
All right, let's see. We'll close the poll in 5 seconds. So closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results. So hopefully this is helpful for the folks who are speaking today. Looks like most of the folks, 53% between 1 to 5, and then 21% 6 to 10, and then another 16, 11 to 20. So that's good information to have. And then we have 2 more questions to ask.
So number 2, you ready?
Yep, number 2.
If you're currently an aspiring CFO, in what time frame do you anticipate that you will be ready to pursue CFO opportunities?
And we know we have some sitting CFOs, so that's the last option. So closing the poll in 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll, and let's see, sharing the results. Interesting. So for all the options from 6 months all the way up to 2 years, exactly equal distribution at 13% and 23%, I'm not sure. So hopefully that's helpful for the speakers. And then we got 1 more somewhat long question, and then we'll turn it over. Give me 1 second, Kristen, just to get it set back up here for the 3rd question. You guys can start reading the question though.
Sure.
Right. There we go.
Okay. So which of the following challenges are currently top of mind for you? And you can pick 3. I don't know if you want me to read the options. Cutting the right costs, attracting, keeping the right talent, identifying the right investments to drive growth, cash and liquidity planning, more frequent, more accurate forecasting, profitability, making the most of technology investments, supply chain disruptions, ESG planning, reporting and compliance, or capital costs, including managing debt.
So let's give it another 5 seconds. So get those answers in, closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, ending the poll. Let's see. You guys can see that. So by far the winner at almost 60% is cash and liquidity planning, followed by, let's see, 46% attracting and keeping the right talent. So our last session is going to be addressing managing talent. So Kristen, we should let Rob know that that got the second most popular answer along with profitability. I didn't see that. Profitability and attracting the right talent are tied. And then the other ones that seem to get a lot are capital costs, including managing debt, identifying the right investments to drive growth, and cutting the right costs, I guess. So, okay. I think with that, we are ready, we're ready to turn it over to Heather. So let me stop sharing. And let's see. We got Heather and Fuad, right? Let's see. There you go, Heather. I see you. I got to spotlight you. And you're on mute, Heather. You can do
I wasn't sure if I was in charge of the mute or you were in charge of the
Oh, no,
so.
you guys get to control your own mutes.
Okay, awesome. All right. Thanks so much for inviting me to join you today. I appreciate it. And my partner, Fuad Ahmad, who is also an FLG partner, is joining me today. We're going to talk about really the accounting aspect. And we know that the CFO role continues to change. With all the advances in technology, there's less emphasis now on scorekeeping and more on strategy. So historically, the CFO has really been responsible for the reporting, the balance sheet, the P&L, the close, all the usual things, regulatory compliance. But, more and more, especially in larger companies, there's more responsibilities that are moving over to the CFO. And a lot of companies are now using CAOs. And, so their controllers and their CAOs are taking on some of those more traditional CFO type tasks and responsibilities. So CFOs are now more involved in risk management, planning, and as well as keeping other C-suite executives, helping them see around the corners and make the best decisions that they can using data. So you might wonder, how do you manage all these diverse, complex parts, right? Some of which are not finance centric. And I think in my experience, where I've seen organizations fail is when companies try to do all this work in silos. So today we'll talk about how to run a successful CFO organization where the CFO can champion the flow of data that's needed to understand the entire finance and accounting organization. And at the end of the day, we just should not lose sight of the why, which is, why are we doing this? We're doing this to support the short and long-term goals of the business by providing timely and actionable data and partnering with the CEO, the board, investors, et cetera, to accomplish goals that have been set, by leadership. So unless a company is very small or very early stage, there are certain areas that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about tax. We're going to talk about compliance, treasury, where CFOs are usually not directly involved with preparing, say, or filing tax returns. CFOs aren't usually, just depending on the size of the company, determining the accounting treatments or the journal entries. The CFO role is really more and more strategic. So I'm going to chat with Fuad, my partner, about how some of these changes are impacting the role and how CFOs can manage these functional areas in their scope of control.
And Heather, hey, Heather, do you guys mind, can you do a quick, intro, your background? You guys have worked at such interesting companies. I know Fuad, because we worked together at like 5 of your companies. So tell us where you work, just to give people perspective.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I knew
No
that
worries.
my bio and Fuad's are on the website, so I didn't want to, flog that dead horse. I am a CFO and administrative partner for FLG Partners. We are a CFO services company. We've been here in the Bay Area for 20 years, and we provide services to companies from Series B through publicly traded companies. And we pretty much focus in 3 main areas, life sciences being the majority of our business. And we do work with all things tech, and we do CPG companies. We also have some clients that are outside of those areas, but that's by and large where we focus. I am a CPA. I've been a CPA for almost 30 years, and I would say that I am a industry agnostic a finance leader. I've worked in lots of different industries, from clean energy to beauty to SaaS, to travel marketplaces. I've worked in a ton of different companies and have had the opportunity to also help clients when I was in public accounting, which I did for 7 years, a long time ago. I think the thing I like to do the most is I like to find efficiencies and help, companies to run their processes and their departments better. I'm a troubleshooter, problem solver. So that's me. And then I'll just hand it over to Fuad.
All right. Thank you, Heather. And thank you, everybody, for hosting me and Heather and FLG Partners. So we're happy to be part of FEI kind of continuing education program. Fuad Ahmed, CFO, been a CFO at, I've been part of FLG for about 10 years. All my CFO tenure goes back to early 2000s, kind of my first CFO gig, full-time CFO. I'm like Heather, I'm kind of industry agnostic. And so my portfolio includes everything from, pure hardware to SaaS, enterprise software, pharma, medical devices, and everything in between. If I do have a specialty, it would be public companies. So most of my clients have tended to be public companies across all sectors. Usually kind of mid-size public companies, but I am agnostic to space. I've been, like I said, been with FLG for about 10 years. And prior to that, I was CFO at a number of public companies. Had a lot of experience on the M&A side, both as an FLG partner, but also when I wasn't, including IPOs, capital markets, and everything in between. So I've seen a lot of different situations. Was in the CFO seat of a public company during the financial meltdown. And guided that company through $1 billion financing transaction when there was no money to be around. Did a couple of startups, sold one that spectacularly flamed out after raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and other we ended up selling to a public company. So I've seen it all. Hopefully I can impart some of my experience to the team here, good and bad, because I believe you learn from bad experiences more so than the good ones you have, because there's little learning when that happens. So I'll like to share as much as I can over the next 35 minutes. All right, back over to you, Heather.
All right, thank you, Fuad. I'm super thrilled to have Fuad joining me today, and I agree with him. It's usually we learn the most when things don't go as planned. So hopefully we can give you guys some nuggets. So for each of the areas we're covering today, it's going to be accounting, tax, audit, and treasury. We're going to just consider at a high level some of the key issues that CFOs need to be focusing on. So in my view, the CFO should be focusing on the strategic plans of the business in light of the current state of the business, and then the steps that they need to take to achieve goals given the marketplace and the economic outlook. So in terms of accounting, tax, audit, and treasury, I think good CFOs should be aware of compliance requirements that impact their companies, and they should, really importantly, they need to make sure they have a competent team. So I think you want to make sure that you are collecting the right data so that you can comply with any requirements, and that you have the right systems, meaning technology and infrastructure in place that is sufficient to report what you need when you need. And I think most importantly, a CFO really needs to know their blind spots. They need to know what they know and know what they don't know, so they can hire team members with the requisite expertise to fill any gaps. So I'm a CPA, but a CFO doesn't have to be a CPA. And as a matter of fact, many great CFOs, including a lot of my partners, are not CPAs. They are not accountants by training. Many were investment bankers or lawyers or analysts. So I think a CFO that doesn't have an accounting background should ideally have a really great controller, a tax manager, strong technical accounting leader, who can analyze standards against the company's activities and determine how and if to comply. So, and just remember, depending on the size of the company, some of these experts could be consultants. So while being a CFO, it does involve more than being a scorekeeper. Timely and accurate reporting are the basis for any effective strategic and financial planning. And then I'm going to ask you, Fuad, did I miss anything? Are there any things that you would want to call out?
No, I think you got most of it. And I'm one of those CFOs that was not an accountant. My background is private equity. And you know, when I took over as a CFO, the compliance piece was actually a big thing. This was the beginning of, you know, SOX 404. That was a big thing. But despite that, you know, I think even then, it wasn't a big focus on, you know, having a CPA on the team. So I ended up hiring the best I could to, you know, to augment what I needed and complement the team that I had. And I've always relied on a super strong technical person. And others would think differently, right? So there will be others who want a big you know, they have a blind spot in the tax area and a blind spot in the FP&A, Treasury, internal audit. So you still want to hire the best people on the for your team as you're building the team. Obviously, that goes without saying, but just, you know, make sure that your blind spots are covered. You know, ultimately, you're not making the journal entries, you're not filing the tax, and you're not doing the tax compliance, but you are signing the documents, right? I'm a Section 16 officer. When I do my public company work, I am signing all the docs, and you know, I'm not expected to know everything, and there's no way you will know everything, but you will rely on your teams to you know, to do the right things. You know, some of the issues, Heather, you talked about some of the things that kind of bother me. It's some of the things that are up in front and center for me right now is employee retention. Although it's better now, it was really much a revolving door for a lot of leaders, you know, in 2001 and 2, I mean, 2021 and 22, less so now. But employee retention has always been a big issue for me to resolve around, and I think it's important that we take care of our employees, and that doesn't really mean throwing money at them, right? So this really means that you give them career opportunities, growth opportunities, meaningful work, and an opportunity to grow within the organization, and communicate with them in a regular cadence. And a big part of my job is providing that leadership. And the way I break my day down, I want to spend at least quarter of my time communicating with my team. And I do that. And sometimes that means it's 12, 14-hour days. But I feel like that is the single most important thing I do on any given day. And it's communication. I mean, it's making sure that I'm in front of them, in the office if I can, Zoom if I have to, and that's kind of super important for me. The other thing.
So you just jumped in and started answering the next question I was going to chat with you about, which is, how do you ensure cohesiveness and coordination, amongst all the various teams that you have to work with? And so I think that communication that you were calling out, is a really big piece of it. And I'm not sure if there's anything else that you like to do in order to make sure that your teams are coordinated and working together really well.
Like I said, I mean, I think communication is key here, because you have to make an effort to do that. If you don't, earmark time and effort to make that happen, it's not going to happen. You're the center of a lot of decision making. You as a CFO, so you need to make sure that you communicate within the organization, across the organization, and sometimes a few levels below you. But it's something that you have to do, and you have to be succinct, and you have to be consistent. It's not 1 week and then don't come to it for weeks at a time. It's be consistent, have your staff meetings, have your AMAs. I've always done AMAs monthly in most of the companies where I've had all hands, and things like that are important to the team. And so it does create a sense of belonging, and I'd say it's simple to do, but I think it pays huge benefits.
Yeah, I would agree. And just to kind of jump on the notion that I talked about earlier about silos, I also think it's very important to sort of be able to, as Fouad was talking about, communicate about what it is that finance is really trying to achieve, and making it a team effort, right? So I think that as finance leaders, we can't be effective if we don't work together with all the other functional areas. And so making sure that our teams also have a really clear understanding of all management programs, projects, plans, and objectives that impact the financials is super important. And I always like to go back to, this is the accounting geek part of me. The thing that we learned that you had to do at the outset of every engagement was to gain an understanding of the business, right? And I think that that's important, whether you're internal or external, to make sure that you understand the underlying business and that the team understands what it is that they're looking at, so that we can be a great service provider as a finance function. And we can provide, necessary information so that we know whether or not we are working towards our goals efficiently, and whether we need to make changes, and how effective, the programs we have in place are for the benefit of the company. So I think probably another thing I would call out about cohesiveness and coordination is, like instilling this one team environment, which I think, you get to, Fouad, with your all hands meetings and keeping everybody sort of informed about, what's going on and how the company is doing and their role in that success. The one other thing I wanted to ask you about, Fouad, was how do you think about the role of technology and infrastructure, as relates to the role of the CFO and the CFO's purview?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's probably my, second big area of interest, typically, is how to introduce new technology, automation, efficiencies into the organization. And actually, this is a process. You have to do this via plan or via strategy. It has to be done strategically, and it has to be done with alignment within the organization. So one of the process I've run, and I've run it successfully at multiple companies, is, especially in the larger ones, with a bigger mandate, is to kind of create a 3-year roadmap. And I call it 3-year finance accounting roadmap. And it covers 3 basic elements. And it's a formal process I run. And it covers, what does your 3-year scaling look like? What does your 3-year technology roadmap looks like? What do you think are the big challenges over the next 3 years you foresee within the organizations? Now, it may seem a little small for a FinOps organization to look 3 years ahead, but I want my team to think about these things. I want the team to think about what are the challenges they're foreseeing, what do they need to see and what do they need to do over the next 3 years. And now, if you're communicating with your team on a regular basis, they know what challenges are coming up front. So this, there's method to this madness. So I want them to think. I want to challenge them. I want them to come to me, and they present that in a team environment to the entire group, at least to the leadership team first, and then to the whole organization. And the idea here is to get alignment across key initiatives, technology initiatives that span multiple years, because most of the technology initiatives will take 8, 10, 12, 18 months to implement fully. So I've done that, and I've done that successfully. It's a tool that I've used in my toolkit to get alignment, especially around technology implementations that have far-reaching output across organizationally. So that's something that I do. Not to say that that's the only way to do it, but this is something that has worked for me, across multiple companies over the last 5, 6 years. It's something new that I've introduced in my kind of toolkit, and it seems to work. But it gets alignment. Any technology play without alignment is bound to fail, and this is my way of getting some alignment.
So what other priorities, are you, sort of anticipating and, dealing with? And I know that you work with different size companies, so I know this is going to depend on the stage and the type of company, but and I saw that the folks who are attending today come from all different kinds of companies. Some are, much larger than others. So maybe you can help talk us through how priorities change, depending on the size of the company, the stage of the company, et cetera. Especially, with, the clients that you've been serving in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a kind of a difficult question to answer because it is very dependent on the size of the company and the stage of the company, and it's a multifaceted view. Priorities can change from day to day because there's priorities that as the office of the CFO will have, and my priorities, but then there's there's the CEO, priorities of the CEO, the board-driven mandated priorities that all have to work together in one way, and sometimes your priorities will be superseded by something that the organization, the company wants at a whole. So you have to be mindful of that. Again, my way of prioritizing, deprioritizing is really to do it in a collaborative way across the team. And the way to do that is to communicate often and enroll the people into the kind of the bigger picture. That's the way I manage it. It feels if you're communicating in a consistent manner and a regular cadence, you are getting the buy-in. You will get the buy-in as your priorities change. As a CFO right now, what bothers me the most is the kind of the potentially changing landscape on the regulatory and compliance side, depending on which way November goes, and it's going to change. The tax mandates are going to change one way or the other. The compliance is going to get more or less depending on which way that goes. So I think that is sort of front and center for me. So for me, I am kind of taking a wait and see approach on some of them. I have limited my exposure a little bit on some of the tax planning initiatives that I had in some of my clients that I had started on. So I am taking a little bit of a wait and see approach. And that's been an example of where I'm deprioritizing the next few months. And actually it started deprioritizing a few months ago until that solidifies. The other thing I do want to mention on a priority is org structure hygiene, which I go through on a regular basis. Again, speaking from experience and practical experience, as organizations grow and morph and scale up or down, you have to relook at your organization and make sure that the right people are in charge on the right side, the size of the organization, as well as the depth of the organization. Even in good times or, kind of normal times, I would do at least 2 main kind of org hygiene exercises across the organization. Allows you to make sure that the team is adequately staffed for where you are in the organization, but also allows you to look at your high performers and make changes to your low performers. But I think twice a year, organizational hygiene exercise is something that I do, and it's important to me. I prioritize that as a kind of a natural exercise.
Great. And then I think we are running out of time, and we could continue forever, but so I want to hit on a couple of things before we need to move over to audit and compliance. And that is, what are some of the skills that may not be top of mind, but should be for somebody who is preparing for a CFO role? So I just wanted to call out, because I know people don't, well, maybe they do. I don't think people think about it as much as they should. But one of the key skills that people who are thinking about CFOs should be considering is their storytelling ability. Because one, believe it or not, many users of financial reports don't actually understand them. So a CFO needs to be able to communicate the so what, right? And do it in very simple language so that users understand what's crucial. And I think it's really easy, especially I'm thinking about my folks in the audience who are, controllers or CAOs. It's easy to, get bogged down in the details because you are in the details. And I'm a bit of an accounting geek, as I keep on saying, so I get that. But really, to be effective as a CFO, you have to be able to distill that data into just the handful of key takeaways, even though there's a ton of other important and interesting information, but distill it down to the key takeaways and then be able to communicate that information in a very easily digestible way. Because while investors on boards do care about your historical, they care how you guys actually did, they're most interested in how those results impact their future, what they can expect for the future. So that's one thing I want to call out that I think might not be very obvious. I would ask Fuad that, but I'm trying to be a timekeeper, and I see we're at 4:40. So I know that I saw some questions going to the Q&A, and so I'm hoping that at the end that we'll be able to come to some of those questions and be able to answer them for you all. But, thank you, Fuad. I so appreciate you chatting with me. It was fun. And we're going to move on to Champreet, who is going to lead us through the audit and compliance considerations for CFOs. And I'll just hand it off to Champreet.
Heather, hey, real quick, should we do the polling question about the accounting standards? Sorry, we got to fit in all these.
I think it's good to do the question, because all we're going to do is use that to advise us if there's some topic we should talk about, for another session. So yeah, I guess they can do it while Champreet is getting ready.
Yeah, so let me just put this question up here. It's a little bit of a long question, but.
Yeah, and I was going to ask Fuad if he's still on, if he could answer that question, but I'll text him if not.
So it's a bit of a long question.
Okay.
Kristen, go ahead. Sorry, I don't mean to step on you.
Yeah, there are several accounting pronouncements that are effective for the first time in 2024 for calendar year-end entities. Which have you or are you anticipating adopting?
And you don't have to read them all, Kristen. You don't
Yeah,
have to read them all,
I
there's
think
a
there's
lot.
too many there to read. I think everybody can scan those.
Yeah.
Hopefully the numbers just jump up if they're applicable to you.
Yeah, we had a lot of footnotes as to applicability and other stuff. So I know, things differ for private versus public, but just to get a sense for where folks are at. And for this one, we didn't put I'm not sure, maybe we should have included that as an option if folks aren't necessarily, super deep in the accounting. Okay. Give it another 5 seconds. So slow 5 seconds. I'm just looking at the percentage participated. So closing the poll in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. And then just real quickly, how they're sharing the results. It seems like who's the winner here? 2021, 8. The contract assets at 39%, followed by 2023-01 common control leasing arrangements, and then the debt 2020-06. So good to know for the future, for possible future sessions. Okay. So thank you for answering those questions. I'm going to stop sharing, and Chanpreet, if you want to get set up with your deck. Heather, do you have any, intro comments about audit, where it fits in kind of in the overall organization, your experiences as Chanpreet's getting set up?
Sure, although it looks like he might be ready. I will comment about audit and compliance. I think that they're a very important partner, and they should be, to finance and to organizations. So I'm actually looking forward to Chanpreet's discussion there.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. I'm sharing my screen. Josette, are you able to see that?
Yes, it looks good. It's perfect.
Okay, excellent. Good evening, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. My name is Chanpreet Singh, and I'm a risk management and a controls professional. I worked within the technology and media and entertainment sector for all of my career. The first 14 years of my experience has been at a Big Four accounting firm, where I was working with both large tech companies as well as emerging growth companies, both pre-IPO and new public companies. And then after that, I transitioned to the industry. So my current role is to lead the internal audit and SOX function at Ouster. We are a leader in digital LiDAR and currently serve customers for various use cases within automotive, smart infrastructure, industrial, and robotics. The topics that I wanted to cover today essentially revolve around 3 questions. The what of internal audit and SOX, the when does a CFO start thinking about bringing in or setting up an IA function for the organization, and the how, namely where and how do you coordinate with different stakeholders who have either a contribution to make as part of internal controls for the organization, or they are the stakeholders who are expecting results from evaluation of controls. But before I dive into that, I do want to spend a couple of minutes in talking about why managing risk today is even more important than it has been ever in the history of capitalism, I would say. If you step back and think about from starting 2020 or mid 2020, we've seen almost everything that could potentially go wrong with the world. We've had the worst global pandemic. We've had the highest unemployment rate in the last 90 years. We've had the most significant war in Europe in 80 years and now in the Middle East. We've had the highest rate of inflation in 40 years, resulting uncertainty with the economy. I don't know how your experience has been, but every month, economists are changing their view on what the next quarter or a few quarters are going to look like. We've had the most aggressive monetary policy in decades. We've seen failures in the banking industry, which we had not seen for a long time. Think about SVB and what it was like for a lot of tech companies in the Valley. We've had so many climate-induced catastrophes that are happening right now, and we continue to read about them. For organizations which have operations in those regions, they're seeing disruption in operations, even though they're short-lived, but it does cause an impact on their P&L and balance sheet. The regulatory changes that we are seeing, SEC is getting more vigilant in terms of the areas that they want to regulate. They've started talking about ESG. They also now want companies to have formal programs around cybersecurity. The reporting is going to start next year. Every significant or material cyber breach has to be reported to the SEC. If you go and pick up PCAOB inspection reports for the last 4 or 5 years, the number of observations that they're having with the accounting firms continues to rise. And some of those are stuff that might sound like, why are they even calling out like basic documentation stuff? But it's the level of scrutiny that these accounting firms are going through, which then impacts companies that they're auditing. And now we have generative AI, which is the talk of the town for the last 1 year. And I think every second forum that you go to is talking about AI and how it can impact our day-to-day work. All of this combined together is creating kind of risk exposure for not just public companies, but companies which are growing fast, because there's a lot of visibility that they get from the media and the press. And so CFOs being at the center of this essentially get assigned with overseeing many programs to address these risks. With that, let's spend a few minutes in looking at what are the different audit and compliance related areas which fall within the purview of a CFO's role. So I see those in 2 broad categories. And while the compliance risk landscape for the organization is much larger, there are areas where finance takes ownership and directly oversees these programs. And then there are those where finance is either an important stakeholder or a key enabler in driving these programs. Generally, the areas which get the most amount of attention are, and most frequently talked about, are SOX 404, working with external auditors, deciding which external audit firms to work with. And then there are other areas which are emerging. For example, when I talk to my peers in the last couple of years, a lot of CFOs have been actively talking about ESG reporting. They've been taking a more active part in cybersecurity programs. But then I think there are some areas which do fall within finance's purview, but in my experience, do not get the kind of attention that they should get, especially when the company is at an early stage, so pre-IPO or year 1. An example is statutory audits and compliance to local regulations for entities that are set up in various jurisdictions across the world. Now, one of the reasons for that is financially, they do not appear as material when we look at the consolidated financial statements, but there's a lot of noise that can happen if there's a non-compliance in a certain jurisdiction because the regulator sends a notice in the name of a Section 16 officer. And while it may not lead to any significant consequence, but the fact that a Section 16 officer has to go and spend time to resolve it itself is a loss for the organization. Another area which a lot of times gets a more paper-filling exercise is doing a fraud risk assessment. There's so much organized crime in areas around payments, especially around payments for vendors, that companies which spend deliberate amount of time and focus in identifying fraud risk scenarios and whether we have the right mitigations in place or not can really benefit and get ahead of that potential exposure. Couple of other areas, finance and accounting policies, especially for private companies or pre-IPO companies. A lot of times policies are norms which are understood, but they're not clearly articulated or documented. So suddenly if there's a new scenario that has to be dealt with and we have to post transactions on, there's ambiguity and somebody might decide to do or take an action based on their experience, which may not be the right thing based on what the policy should be for the company. Another area, and depending on your capital structure, if you have a debt from a financial institutions, often those contracts come with covenants, and there's a lot of fine detail in those covenants in terms of the amount of monitoring that is required. Another area where some kind of a formal program helps to make sure that we are not breaching a covenant, which can then create an issue with respect to our debt position. Couple of other areas where finance is a key stakeholders, enterprise risk management. Now, while this is an enterprise-wide program, a lot of mitigations for key risks that get identified get tagged to the finance organization. So again, CFOs play a very active role in making sure that there's formal reporting around that. And then another area on the right-hand side I would highlight is third-party risk management, especially if you have significant dependence on service providers, especially if you're working with technology providers, so cloud or SaaS-based systems. How do we work with them? Do we have sufficient coverage from a risk and control standpoint? Is another area where finance plays an active role or can play an active role. With that, I'm going to go to my first polling question. Based on the list that we just looked at, which of the following areas is generally not within the purview of finance? And Josette, I'm going to let you do the countdown on this one.
Okay. Let's give it another, there we go. Let's give it another 5 seconds. So get those answers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Champreet, I think it was an easy one. 95% privacy.
And
ESG.
I think in the 5%, I'm the one who deliberately gave a wrong answer.
Okay, you can blame Champreet.
All right. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the when question. You know, often when I talk to my peers and while I was working in the advisory practice at PwC, a lot of clients used to ask this question, when do we think about setting an internal audit function? What is the right time? And I want to go back and piggyback on one of the things that Heather and Fuad were talking about is I think the key here is to be strategic in when is the right time for the organization to have the maturity to give assurance to the stakeholders that matter. The advantage of thinking of this before you go public is to avoid or reduce the list of blind spots, which, you know, one of the things Heather was talking about. It's not that we can completely get rid of blind spots. There are always going to be some things that we don't know, but we want to make sure that that blind spot is not for an area which could create a significant risk exposure for us. A lot of mistakes that I've seen companies make is, one, they equate SOX as the same thing as internal audit. And so, you know, just because you've set up an internal audit function doesn't mean the SOX 404 is going to take care for itself. Also, if you are planning to be public, then there's only so much that an internal audit function can do in terms of executing on controls, because you want your internal audit function to be independent and objective, what we call as the truly third line of defense for the organization. And so thinking about the transition for that role, if you're looking to start on your program 18 months before you go public, then maybe initially the focus should be helping management build a framework from ground up. And then once that framework has been set up, you've designed and implemented controls, then you can transition the role to say, now this person can do independent assurance, which means they can test controls and then go and report to the board audit committee as well as the executive leadership. Again, thinking about first and second line roles for the organization. So, and this is where describing the ownership for internal controls becomes critical. Again, this common perception tends to be, if you have an IA function and you've hired somebody in that role, they're going to write all your policies, or they're going to go and essentially execute on controls and provide sign-offs before you can close your books. I think having that clarity and having a transition plan for somebody in that role is going to get you the success to make sure that we are not creating significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, which is a common occurrence for companies which are just planning to go public. In terms of timing, I think there are three critical factors that one really needs to take into account. One is, how are you thinking to scale your operations? And this is where decisions about do you hire somebody internally or do you outsource assurance function to somebody becomes important. Both have its own advantages. So for example, for some reason, if you start to plan for internal auditing 6 months before you're going public, or you've already gone public and that's when internal audit is being set up, it may be much faster to go and hire an expert from outside and have this do for you in the short run while you figure out what the internal function looks like for the organization. Versus if you're being strategic, to Fuad's point, you have the time to make sure that you have an internal assurance function and they are taking the time to understand how the business operates. They are embedded well into the core operations. And so therefore, they're well positioned when it comes to doing formal reporting on controls or gaps as and when they are identified. The other aspect is gauging the maturity of the control environment. So thinking about folks who are going to be front and center for owning and executing controls. What is their level of experience of having worked with public companies before? To what extent do they have a good risk mindset and they understand where controls come in and what their impact is? And looking at the existing programs that already exist at a company. An example would be if you're, let's say, a SaaS-based company and that's what your product is, chances are that you would be thinking about controls through which you need to give assurance to your customers. In other words, issuing SOC 1, SOC 2 reports. So your IT side for IT side of things, especially on the product side, may already be pretty mature. So to what extent can you leverage that in getting the organization ready for SOX 404 compliance? And then the last piece is, what is the existing risk exposure for the organization? What kind of issues do you already have? Are there gaps that you already know of? Or can you do a quick exercise to figure out how good or bad or how ugly it is? And so that way you can ascertain how much time will it take for the organization to reach a stage where you're essentially having a clean set of controls results for the organization. Another side of audit and compliance is working with external auditors. And one of the common questions that I've seen being asked is, do you work with the Big Four? What is a good time to bring in a Big Four accounting firm? How do you decide which accounting firm to work with? Why do our auditors ask for so much stuff? Is it really required from what they're supposed to do? They're asking us of screenshots of what we are doing on a day-to-day basis. stuff like that. And I think it all comes down to thinking about, one, what is the nature of accounting firm that you're working with? If you're a small operation working in 3 locations, working with a Big Four right up front may not be the best solution for you. And again, I'm not vouching for any category of firms here, but I think doing the right size fit is critical there. Also, the amount of engagement that you get with that firm is going to vary depending on how big or small you are. And you know that they are also in client service. The second key aspect is whether that firm is a good culture fit or a sector fit. Different firms have their strengths in certain sectors in certain regions in the country. So thinking about, do you benefit by having a firm which has a local office and come to your office, engage with your stakeholders, is going to significantly change the experience of your process and control owners as they think about making progress on SOX 404 and maturing that program. The other aspect to think about is how soon are you going to be 404B? Now, for those of you who are not as familiar with SOX 404, there are 2 primary provisions, 404A and 404B. 404A is management's assertion on internal controls as at the end of the financial year. 404B is external auditors' opinion on internal controls. Technically, both of them require the same framework, but the key difference is because the external auditors are also being inspected by PCAOB, and as I was mentioning, the PCAOB's oversight over external audit firms is increasing by the year, and the number of observations they have, their inspections is going up. The external auditors bring that message and recommendations to their own methodology every year. So in turn, we have to support making sure they pass their inspection. So getting ready for that kind of oversight from an external auditor does take a little bit of time and effort. So it is not something that's going to happen in 1 or 2 quarters. It will probably take a couple of years. So thinking about that timing is, again, an important factor to consider when you think about which audit firm to work with. Some of the leading practices are, think about early agreement with external auditors on what management's view of key risks, what is their scope, what is their view of materiality, aligning on approach and methodology. So what is the sample size you want your internal audit to do versus what the external firm's approach is. And this is where things get, things can have issues at year end, especially if they're relying on management's work. So if they want to do 60 samples for testing a control, but because you're doing only 25, in the last 1 month or 2 weeks, they're going to come back and say, oh, you got to test more samples. And that's where you may not have enough time, which may impact your filing deadlines. And then thinking about how you're coordinating on the testing timelines. A lot of times, process owners get hit twice. So the internal audit function has their requests because they have to do their testing, and then external auditors have their own set of PBCs that they ask for. And so all the process owners are doing at quarter end is supporting the auditors rather than closing the books. So how can you coordinate and align on the timeline so that you can leverage the same set of population and samples to serve both the audit requirements?
And, Champreet, I just wanted to jump in here and just make an observation that I've had over the years, just as you talk about, this time challenge, right? People are, pulling information for one group and pulling information for another group. And what I've heard is, a lot of functional areas really see internal audit as a little bit of a nuisance, right? They're like, I don't know why we have to do all this stuff, it's like they feel like it's a waste of time, et cetera. And I know, well, I'm an audit geek as well. And I was never an internal auditor, but I was an external auditor. And I look at all audit teams as actually my buddies, because I feel like, the internal audit team are excellent at being able to identify things that maybe the internal team has not noted is a control gap or an operational inefficiencies. So it's not just, the financials, it's also, the operations. And, they're just a unique group of people, I think, who can really help a company, do better in terms of, their end goals, because they can find those opportunities for improvements, right? It's a very difficult message to put across, and knowing that this is your space, what are some of your strategies, or have you been so lucky in your career that you've never had pushback and you've had the internal teams happy to have you guys come in and do your thing?
Well, I wish I was that lucky. I think pushback is something that especially an IU function sees very frequently, and there are various reasons for it. It's not that people push back for the sake of pushing back. It tends to be the amount of priority and other things which are top of mind for management in terms of what they have to do on a day-to-day basis. But I think the key here is truly, and this is where I think the role of internal audit becomes critical in my view, is that they always have to think about themselves as partners for the business.
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, the goal is to identify a gap so that we can help improve the maturity of the business, improve the governance overall, so that there's better trust for the organization.
Exactly, because of that whole role of managing risk, right? It's that whole concept of managing risk. So, yeah, sorry to jump in. I just excited about it.
So the other thing I would highlight is, and this is, I think, especially in the early years of 404B becomes critical, is if a gap or a deficiency is identified by the external auditor versus it's identified by internal audit or management themselves, there's a very significant difference in terms of how it gets treated by the external auditor.
Exactly.
So it's always better to identify gaps yourself rather than auditor saying, hey, we found these 5 things, and so therefore, we're going to make a big noise about it.
Exactly.
I know we are almost coming to time, so I'll quickly cover a couple of other questions. One, I think some of you may have already been seeing this, that these are some of the common issues that you see when you're small or you're just recently have become public. And when we saw the answer to the polling question, it looks like all of you are working with lean teams. What that does is it creates a lot of segregation of duty issues, or can create SOD issues, which may not be apparent upfront, but because the activities are so segregated in terms of their timing, it may not look like an SOD issue, but it actually can be. Something like you may be approving a vendor in your system, but you may also be approving an invoice which doesn't have a PO. Now, they may be happening 2 months apart, but technically you have the ability to pay somebody without anybody's approval. So stepping back and thinking about how the roles, responsibilities are segregated is going to help mitigate that risk. Another area where you find material weaknesses for a lot of new public companies is ITGCs. How is the access to different systems being restricted? How are you handling change management? A common occurrence for a lot of companies is shadow IT groups. There are different teams which have their own IT experts, and they will bring in a vendor and implement a new system. And then the IT team will get to know, by the way, we implemented the system. Can you go and restrict access now? And by the time it's probably already too late. And a couple of others I'll highlight is that if you've gone public or going public through a SPAC route, there may already be some material weaknesses or deficiencies sitting on books, which you may inherit. So my only recommendation to everybody is when you're thinking about that transaction, do pay attention to that as well, because that can become a long-term pain. And on the right-hand side, those are some of the common areas where you would find MWs being reported by companies. The last one is probably the most common. Almost every SPAC company that I've seen in their 10K, they say they don't have the right accounting team with appropriate knowledge and experience. So therefore, the control environment is weak. So think about how the finance organization is structured. Heather was talking about looking at the competent team and whether they have the right experience as you're becoming larger, and especially a larger public company. That is going to pave the way for success. And what I would probably close with is a quick commentary on what a good foundation looks like. And I know Heather and Fuad talked about some of this for the finance organization in general, but I think they equally apply as we're thinking about risk management, internal control, especially SOX. Tone at the top, I think, is the most important thing. It's probably the least appreciated thing. We can set as many controls in the world as we can, but that cannot substitute integrity and the right behavior. And so I think not just mentioning it one time, but having some kind of a mechanism to have that communication going from leadership is going to set the tone for the entire organization. Ford was talking about the amount of the quality with respect to risk assessment. So Heather was saying, looking at so what, I think that is so important when it comes to looking at what matters. A term that you would often hear from accounting firms is what can go wrong. So it's not just the actual error that occurs, but what could have been the extent of error. And that is a slippery slope because it's very difficult to defend it. One of the other things that mature functions have started doing is they are also thinking about risk sensing or what if scenarios. Like, what if we do this? What if we go and launch in this market? What if we set up this new entity? How is that going to change our risk landscape? So I think that's where we have to think ahead so that we can reduce our blind spots. Couple of other things which can help, which I would highlight, is looking at the quality of training and communication. Often, companies would do SOX 101 trainings for the stakeholders, but it's not one training. I think it's an ongoing development of your teams so that they develop their own risk mindset. So before something goes wrong, they can raise their hand to say, I think we may have an issue here. And then probably the last thing I would highlight is think about how can you embed this as part of people's performance measures, because that's what will incentivize them to take ownership. With that, I will probably go to my polling question and pause. Which of the following is not a foundational element for setting up the SOX program? Communication and training, process and control ownership, sample testing, oversight, and program governance. Which of the following is not a foundational element for setting up the SOX program?
So not. Okay, so let's give it 5 more seconds, guys. Closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results, Jeffrey.
Well, most of you got it right. Sample testing. That's part of the methodology. It's not a foundational element. All right. That's all I got, Heather.
Okay, well, no, thank you so much, Jampreet. I really enjoyed your presentation. As you know, I geek out about this stuff, and I really liked the information that you shared. I think a key takeaway is setting up an attitude and a mindset of continuous improvement, and that's a good strategy for helping to wrap the controls into your day-to-day. Oh, it's a break.
Yes.
It's a break spot. Yes.
Break. Yeah, exactly.
So what happens for the breaks, Josette?
Yeah, so we'll take a 5-minute break. Everybody come back at 5:20, and then when we come back, let's take a group picture. We'll do a couple of intros, and then I'll have Glenn spend 30 seconds. I'm going to put up on the screen during the break just a reminder about next week's case study. So take 5 minutes and come back. Heather, you can take a break too.
Thank you.
While you guys are coming back, take a quick peek at the reminder on the slide. This is in preparation for the case study next week. Glenn, do you want to say 30 seconds about what people should do in advance of next week?
Sure. Is everybody back?
I think people are kind of, let's see. Let's maybe give them
Want to make sure that we don't miss people.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. If you can come back. Turn your cameras on. After Glenn talks, we'll take a quick group picture. and then do a couple of intros, and then we'll turn it over to Nick and Heather.
I think we got most people back.
I think so. I think some people are still off camera. So come back, go on camera real quick. Glenn wants to make sure you guys are listening.
Makes next week a little more meaningful.
Exactly.
Okay, so last week we gave you guys the Excel file, and the homework was just to look through it and be familiar with it. If you wanted to be ambitious, you could go over and categorize some data, put it into graphs, whatever. The project for your groups next week will be to create a one-page dashboard. The reason why we are doing this is we've been doing the same case study for the last 3 years. Everybody really likes it, but everyone kept on saying they ran out of time because they would spend 15 minutes trying to figure out what the data looks like. And then they would start putting together the dashboard because you're going to have 35 minutes total. So this is where if you could spend that time up front, go through the Excel file. There's 2 different tabs of data in there. One related to products and customers and revenues, and the other one related to operating expenses and departments. And they both are for 2 different years. And just get familiar with it. If you have any questions, Josette in the email included my email. Feel free to ping me. Happy to answer any questions. You don't really have to do anything. You just other than look through it. So that's our request.
Glenn, can you pop your email in the chat? And what I did was I also put a link in the chat to that spreadsheet, just in case if you haven't looked at the emails or looked at anything, and then you can contact Glenn if you guys have any questions. So, all right.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you, Glenn. Glenn's going to be leading next week's discussion, so looking forward to that session. Okay, I am going to stop sharing, and real quick, if everybody can, who's available, turn on your camera. We got to take a group picture. I forgot to do this last week, and then we're going to post on LinkedIn. So if you are available, the shy people. All right, everybody wave, make a funny face, do something different. Give me 1 second to snip it. All right. Give me 1 second. All right. I think we're in good shape. Thanks, you guys. I'll tag everybody on LinkedIn. Okay. So I think with that, we can go on to a couple of intros. So Patty, Rohit, and Craig, can you guys do your less than a minute intros? Patty, we'll start with you. We weren't able to get to you last week either.
No worries, and I will keep it short. So I'm Patty Aguilar. I'm
Sorry.
I was formerly with Deloitte. I was 25 years with Deloitte, left as an audit partner. I'm now working at a consulting firm, Krantz Consulting, in the area of technical accounting, which, was mentioned as, having to deal mostly with complex and non-routine transactions. So one of my superpowers that I've learned is that I have a knack and an ability to help clients understand the considerations in the journey and simplifying that process for them, since I live in a very technical world of accounting standards and the interpretations therein. I've also learned throughout my career that I have a very strong diplomatic ability. So I'm able to deliver tough messages, but also help resolve conflict. And that has always been somewhat of my skill. I think it's because I grew up in a family of 7 kids. It's kind of a natural thing. And then lastly, just discovered that I have a knack for learning languages or picking up on languages very quickly, especially when I'm traveling, just things that I need to learn, just to, hello, thank you, what have you, knowing how to read a menu more or less. And that's a personal superpower, I'd like to think. Helps me connect with a bunch of people. So.
Yeah, no, we should travel with Patty. That's the best part. Thanks, Patty. All right. So Rohit, can you go? Where are you? Too many people here. There you are. You got the great background. That's right.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Rohit, originally from India, but I live in San Francisco with my wife and our dog. I attended the first boot camp earlier in the year, and Josette and team did such a great job that I'm back for more. So I started my finance career with a hedge fund in Minnesota, initially in Treasury. And then after a few years, I moved to a trading role trading fixed income arbitrage strategies. Was a great opportunity to have like a front row seat to the global economy, especially during the financial crisis. 10 years ago, I moved to the Bay Area. I was the head of portfolio management and trading at a small investment management firm. And after about 3 years, I decided to pivot back into Treasury, spent time at various tech companies here in the Bay Area, VMware, Uber, Zendesk in various Treasury roles, and then joined my current company, Protocol Labs, 3 years ago as the treasurer. We are a blockchain company. We have our own blockchain and cryptocurrency. In terms of superpower, I would say my superpower is solving gnarly business problems using first principles. I'll just give a couple of quick examples. In my early days at the hedge fund in Treasury, we had about 4 billion of excess cash. So rather than investing it in a money market fund, we decided to create our own money market fund internally and ended up beating money market yields by like 30 to 40 basis points by cutting out the middleman and focusing on the highest risk reward opportunities. And then in my current role, I've been working on financing for a couple of years, but it's been very tough because we are a privately held company in the blockchain space. So I designed a sort of a hybrid debt equity financing structure, and we just closed the first tranche with a boutique lender, which was a big win for the business. So I'll pause there and I'll drop my LinkedIn in the chat. If people want to connect, that'll be great.
Thanks, Rohit. No, appreciate that. Glad that you're back with us. And then finally, Craig, if you can do a quick intro, then we'll move on to the next section. Craig, where are you? There you are. I see you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Craig Friedman. Like Rohit, I live in the Bay Area with my wife, and I did live with my dog, but we had to put my dog down 2 days ago because he had cancer. So our household is very, very quiet because he was a watchdog, and it's very sad too because it was kind of a sad time. But Rohit's comment made me think of that. Anyway, I've enjoyed a pretty diverse career, I'd say, with over 20 years of broad international experience, providing finance, business operations, and strategy leadership to both multi-billion-dollar global organizations such as Sun Microsystems, EMC, and Cisco Systems, as well as a number of small to medium-sized technology companies. Although I grew up professionally in Silicon Valley, most recently, I was working as the head of FP&A for the Myers-Briggs Company, which is an employee learning and development and professional services organization. Unfortunately, TMBC endured a significant restructuring in July, and they laid off between 20 and 25% of their employees, including the entire leadership team, the CFO, whom I work for, as well as myself and my financial analysts. So it was a pretty big gutting. So I'm currently exploring new opportunities. I'd say my superpower is working with diverse and geographically dispersed groups of people to facilitate collaboration and to achieve greater results together, which applies to leading finance and business operations projects and processes such as strategic and financial planning and forecasting, business systems implementations, M&A due diligence, and integrations, as well as managing the monthly accounting close and reporting responsibilities. So that's my background in a nutshell. So please feel free to reach out to me. I can put my LinkedIn in the chat as well, but please reach out to me if I can be of service to you in any ways. I'm always happy to contribute.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate you sharing. So I think with that, Heather, we're ready for the next session. The next section, we're going to be doing a breakout group with a question. So we can go ahead and do the polling questions to kind of set things up. So let me.
I was just going to say that. Do you want me to put in that? I can put the question for the group and the breakout in the.
I'll put it up right here, and then here is the question, Kristen, for you to read.
Okay, great. Where is your company with regards to AI in your accounting and finance organization?
The breakout group is going to focus on this.
That's our question, yeah.
Yeah, we have a more specific question for you guys.
Yeah, and I'll put the question in the chat for the.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'll put it up on the slides too, but if you can do that, Kristen, that would be great.
Yeah, that way people have it in the chat. They can start thinking about their answer because we'll be collecting answers.
So let's get those answers in. So 5 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results. So it looks like the majority of people, over 60%, haven't done any experimentation, followed by 28% who have a number of experiments. So just 3% have implemented stuff. So that should be interesting. Whoever's in the breakout groups there, that should be a good discussion. Okay, so we're going to go into breakout groups, and the question here is, how do you think AI is impacting CFOs and their teams? And Christian, there was another part of the question that I forgot to put there, right? Let's see. And then what aspects, if you have implemented aspects of AI, what aspects are you considering implementing? So if you guys can talk about that in your groups, we'll give you guys about 12 minutes to chat. You're going to get speakers who are going to help lead the discussion. And so they'll help lead the discussion. But if you guys, each in your group, can pick somebody to report out when we come out, how there's going to poll everybody to see what everybody talked about. So I'm going to open the.
All right. Hopefully, everyone had very interesting conversations, and I'll ask for the leaders of each group to tell us, what you guys discussed, so that we can discuss all together as a group. So, who was the group 1 leader?
We didn't really have a leader. We just sort of collaborated.
Oh, okay.
I would say Christina was the most inquisitive. So Christina, please help me out. But I think everybody sort of was more interested in hearing what everybody else is doing. You know how that goes.
Okay.
Nicole had some interesting thoughts about bank recs, and we discussed Excel, and then giving company information and the security issues around AI. That was sort of our overall assessment. How did I do? Christina, Nicole, anything to add?
No, that's good. I think most of our group hasn't adopted too much of AI beyond just transcribing, Zoom and meetings and that type of thing. But
correspondence, yeah.
Correspondence, yeah. Love to hear what others do.
And group 2, what were you guys? What have you guys implemented? What are you thinking about implementing? Are you doing it at all?
Yeah, so I'm speaking for group 2. So we were similar, not most of our companies haven't fully embraced AI. One person had worked at a company that first blocked it, and basically out of fear, just how do we put the controls around it? So they first blocked it, and then it sounded like they were adding back controls and limited access. But a lot of us were using it for emails, policy. One person talked about a safe agreement, just understanding what she was signing. And then again, legal documents. We found that to be the most useful. The other thing that most of us noted is that our third-party vendors were actually incorporating it and basically adopting it before us, essentially. Like a few of us had it with our invoices or other programs.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. And group 3, any similar themes?
Yes, very similar to what Kimberly said too. Like, none of our companies are currently are implementing anything with AI. But I think a lot of the themes were really like reading policies, having kind of a first pass, kind of saving time in that sense. Also maybe some client correspondences like that are automated. But since nothing's current, something to think of the future, it's like, yes, it would be great if it could be maybe a starting a baseline for forecasting, any kind of mundane accounting tasks that could solve as well, which kind of relate to another FEI event that a couple of folks have attended, which is the AI impact in finance. So kind of all related to that.
All right. Group 4, anything additional?
Ryan, you wanna,
Yep. Sorry, I was muted. So yeah, we shared among the experience and perspective on the machine learning and AI technology, and most people feel pretty confident and positive in the long term. But based on the experience from the folks, we still think the AI technology is in the experiment stage. Personally, I had a few conversations with friends that I know in the fintech industry. They are doing the AI startup, and they have product, for example, automating the collection process and product automating the revenue forecast. Like Glenn, Rohit also share their experience. We do see the advantage of AI technology that to drive efficiency, save costs, and improve the production on the process automation part. However, we do see the limitation on things like cash forecast, revenue forecast, because AI, the technology just highly depends on the clean data. However, the AI technology is like not doing really good on that part. So good and bad.
Okay. And so was there really a group 5?
Yeah, there was a group 5, there was no group 6. Bosco went in 6.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So group 5, sans Bosco, what did you guys come up with?
So that was Carrie, Jonathan, Kevin, Matthew, Richard, Sonia, Sunil, and Sil.
Okay, so I guess I got nominated by Sunil to speak on our group's behalf. So I think we touched upon a lot about privacy. I think everybody is concerned about inviting AI in. So how do firms protect their data? And also we've also talked about user case, right? Sonia's firm has explored possibility using AI to manage contracts. And Sunil attended Salesforce last week, and he mentioned about looking at all these firm building AI agents, right? To look at all different user case that's expand from being chatbot or workflow streamlined, also CRM management process as well. So I kind of brought up, we all know OpenAI has been working with Morgan Stanley, right? In a way, trying to help their wealth management to figure out how to better serve their client. And within my group, I think I perhaps the one that work with AI more closely. We have a proof of concept just completed recently using the large language model to digest investment documents, synthesize them from like 100 plus pages to 5, and highlight all the tidbits from there. So I see Nick Lee has his eyebrow raised, but it's all exciting things going on in the space.
Okay, all right. No, that's very interesting. The thing I would call out to the group is just because of the comment made by group 2 around blocking it. I think the thing that and I always think about everything in terms of like risk management, right? And companies, have to sort of recognize that their teams are going to use AI whether they want them to or not. So it's better to, have if you have a policy that it's blocked, you're just not going to know what's actually happening in the background, because people are going to use tools to make their jobs easier. So And that's just the call out I would make around that, just in terms of there are lots of companies, have found that they thought nobody was using AI, but then they actually are. So it's kind of better to have a policy around it versus just thinking that you can block it because, people are going to use things.
Yeah. Oh, Heather, and that was Colin, I believe, that his company, and it sounded like they blocked it, and then they kind of, Colin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but then they started to set controls, but they blocked it initially. Like
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah,
that
I think that, yeah, they initially, they blocked until they developed the policy and then asked people to follow the policy just so that they would have some control over it.
Yeah, what I've noticed also is a lot of my job is also, contracting, and more companies are adding into, their NDA policy, their NDA agreements, language around, how AI and large language models can be used, to look at information, relating to them and, their business. So I think it's interesting. We're at a very exciting, point in we're at an exciting point in the history of technology. And I think we'll see, lots of changes in the way we do work. I know a lot of the big four firms that I've talked to, some of the partners there, have shared with me, how they are trying to, incorporate AI into how, they do some of their like research and that type of work, just accessing, the standards and, pulling and matching and tagging data. So I think, it's we're definitely going to see it, whether we are comfortable with it or not. And I think there are some interesting ways that it could, help to make everyone's jobs a lot easier. I, for one, I'm super excited about it. I have my concerns, of obviously, around privacy, etc. But I'm excited.
And Heather, I think
and
one of the things one of the things you pointed out was really the new AI versus the AI which has existed for I would say a decade. Like machine learning has existed for the longest
Forever,
time.
yeah.
Right. And because of the sensation that ChatGPT created, LLMs have become the talk of the town, right? So that's where most people think about the application or the use cases. A lot of providers are embedding machine learning or have been embedding machine learning for quite some time, so that the results from working with large amounts of data are more reliable from what it has been before.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, one of the things that we're seeing with a lot of different companies is an uptick in terms of not only AI, but also the number of breaches and cybersecurity risk as well. And so we've been helping a number of different companies with cybersecurity risk assessments. The NIST CSF just recently came out earlier this year. So then a lot of companies are really doing a number of overhaul of looking into their cybersecurity risk. Is obviously the benefits of AI is really helping a lot of companies, but also what additional risks are getting exposed as well. So we're doing a number of AI readiness assessments and also helping companies really understand the landscape that's going to be changing quite drastically nowadays.
Attention to the terminal.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That was like an airport announcement. It sounded
Oh,
like
okay.
a terminal.
All right. Okay.
I think that was background noise.
Okay. All right. Good. Because I was like, I didn't hear that at all. Yeah. No, I think, cybersecurity risk is a whole other area, that I think more and more CFOs are having to get, involved with, just because, they always say, well, I don't know, I go to a ton of CPE around internal audit and controls and IT controls, and it's the old saying, either you've been hacked, or you just don't know you've been hacked yet. But and those are the two categories of people or companies. So yeah, definitely it brings that to the forefront. What companies need to do to sort of make sure they're aware of what the risks are, and what they're doing to mitigate those risks, because I don't think that they can be completely avoided, but they can be mitigated. So I think I'm curious to see how this conversation changes in terms of how many companies are using AI, maybe next year, or maybe in the next 6 months. Actually, I feel like the numbers might go up higher. I was surprised by the polling result, where there's a lot of companies who haven't even tried or not experimenting. I expected different results, so that was an eye opener for me. But it'd be curious to see how that information changes as time goes by. So are there any other AI type conversations that folks want to have? Do you guys have any questions or concerns that we can talk about as a group before we move on to the next section, which is exciting and new tax?
We're probably good. Yeah, I think.
Okay, great.
A little
Awesome.
long for time.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, I'm pleased to introduce Nick. Tax and is one of those topics that either you love it or you hate it, but we need it. So I'm excited to get started on this section. Nick, take it away.
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. Love it or hate it, I've loved it probably my entire career, and it runs in the family. My dad was a tax auditor for the IRS, and so that it just like passed through in the DNA, right? So my first job out of college actually was a tax auditor with the state of California. So long, extensive career for me, tax auditor, auditing payroll taxes, various companies in the state of California. And then from there, transitioned to Big Four accounting. So got that stepping stone. I was always told you can't get into industry unless you have Big Four accounting experience. So PwC, KPMG for a little stint as well. But there I was involved in state and local tax. So getting familiar with sales tax, property tax, continue on with.
Can I just break in and tell you that my favorite professor when I was doing my undergrad was a former IRS auditor as well. And he had the best stories. I mean, the absolute best. And it was in Minnesota, which you would think would be, low for any kind of drama, but it was great. So one day you and I will connect to hear those stories. So.
Oh, absolutely. Love to. And I would say, I hung out with a bunch of IRS auditors as a kid. So my dad was always playing softball or basketball. I was just hanging out with IRS auditors. I'm like, oh, these are the guys that are auditing all these big companies. And they were so fun. But I still, as I'm looking back, wow, these are the guys that were representing our government. So yeah, a lot of fun stories there. So yeah, did my stint at the Big Four accounting firms, got compliance experience on the tax side. So preparing corporate tax returns, partnership returns, and that helped me transition into getting jobs in industry. So from there, it was Johnson & Johnson, Google for 9 years. And then after Google, I got head of tax roles at Matson, the ocean transportation company, which is a fantastic lifeline. Kristen Maurer was so generous to be able to forward my resume over to the CFO there and help me get the job there. That was my first head of tax role, so really appreciate her for that. And then from there, it was to some startups. You guys may have heard of this vaping company called Juul, which kind of, that was an exciting time with an incredible roller coaster up and then the crash down. So to be a part of that, there's a Netflix documentary on it. And I remember reading some of the books about it as well. And when the Netflix documentary was going on, they were showing corporate org chart. And I was hoping that my name wasn't going to be anywhere on that thing. So luckily it wasn't. So after leaving Juul, then I got head of tax jobs at Nextdoor, and most recently here at OpenAI, which has been another whirlwind. And we just got some unfortunate news that some of our leaders have recently departed. That's now hit the press. And so we have to try to figure out how all that's going to play out with our company. It's been a whirlwind as well. Obviously, you guys heard about what happened and saw what happened to our company last year with the ousting of our CEO and then brought him back. So fun to be a part of, I would say. It's stressful to be a part of a lot of times. when I had started 2 years ago at OpenAI, ChatGPT literally came out a week before. And so to see this exponential growth in that short period of time and trying to get our arms around it, I was essentially starting the tax function and building that out and trying to do that with limited budget and limited understanding of how quickly we were going to grow. So that was a huge challenge. So that's my background. That's where I'm at today. Like as I said, I really love doing tax. I've been doing it my whole career, spanning 30 plus years now.
Wow, that you know what, whirlwind, very exciting. You know, it's trial by fire, but you know, it's good.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes, sometimes. Other times, like, what is going on here? How do I get past this? Yeah, there's a lot of that's going on right now, and just all the Slack messages that are coming across my desk now are just it's endless, and there's a lot of that going on. Just trying to balance that out and make sure that the team is okay.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, let's have a conversation, Heather. Just happy to be chatting with you about this.
Okay, so I think we're starting with a polling question.
Quick one, Kristen.
Thank you. So you guys can read this, but how involved are you with tax strategy and implementation at your company?
Just so you guys can see the experience of the folks in the room. Okay, 5 seconds. That was an easy one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Not too much.
Run the gamut.
Yeah.
So if that's helpful. Okay. Do we want to do the election question or save that for later? You can start talking about stuff and then when we get a little bit in, you want to do that or you want to get that out of the way now?
Let's just do it.
Just do it? Okay. So here we go.
So it says, what is your company's top tax strategy consideration as we approach the upcoming presidential election?
Okay, so 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results. So pretty interesting. 48%, no significant changes.
Oh, yeah.
30%,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so based on your vast experience, Nick, what are the key focus areas that you think a tax department should prioritize just to make sure that it's actually adding value to the organization, in more than the obvious ways?
Sure. Yeah. Vast meaning I'm old now, but anyways, when I think about prioritization for a tax function, you got to have a department that's technically sound, right? Tax technical subject matter experts. When business partners are reaching out to the tax function, they need to know that they're getting the right answer. If that person doesn't know or the department doesn't know, certainly have vendors, outside advisors that can help with that, but at least have somebody internally that can understand the question and understand the issues that are coming up. Like, I don't know everything about tax, but I've had enough experience to be able to say, ooh, I can loop in this person, or, oh, maybe I use ChatGPT. I don't know. I can just at least get a head start. But knowing who to plug in, I have a vast network of outside advisors that I can rely on at any time. I think over the years, I've built that up. And then as I'm building out the team, just making sure that I have really strong folks on VAT. Certainly as OpenAI has grown and expanded its international footprint, selling into all these different countries, I needed a really strong VAT person. Sales tax, I needed a really strong sales tax person, but also given all the incredible expansion that we've had in a short period of time, it's making sure that we can manage all the income tax compliance that we're going to have. We have an incredibly complex structure. And so just trying to get our arms around that and plugging in the right tax technical experts internally was key, and that was like priority number one. Certainly, as you focus on compliance and all the jurisdictions that we're in, we have to make sure that we have a robust tax calendar. We know where we're going to be filing returns. Like every jurisdiction we go into, do we have a VAT filing? Do we have an income tax filing, a gross receipts tax filing, digital service tax filing? How is our products, or how are our products being categorized that would subject us to tax in those different jurisdictions? But having that robust calendar, that tax calendar, and understanding all of our filings has always been key to me. Compliance is near and dear to my heart, and I want to make sure that all the tax filings are done timely, accurately, all the payments are made timely, accurately. Right? And so we want to make sure that we're paying our fair share of taxes, nothing more in all the jurisdictions that we're in, right? So minimize our taxes as best we can, right? Tax provision, we need to have tax technical competencies around tax provision. If we have, Microsoft is a partner of ours, so we need to make sure that we have reporting responsibilities up to them. That's done correctly. External auditors, right? Champreet mentioned earlier about SOX controls and dealing with external auditors. We got to just make sure that we sit down with them. We're very transparent about our income tax provision. Any items that need to go on our tax footnotes and disclosures and our financials is key. So compliance, provision, technology also is very important for us, making sure that we can rely and utilize the technology that we have. Within OpenAI, we certainly experiment quite a bit. We have hackathons, right? We try to figure out how to best use our technology. We're not blocked in any ways like a lot of other companies, obviously. So we try to leverage off of some of the newer versions of the models that we can use in order to try to streamline some of our processes, whether it's writing scripts to try to extract data from our various softwares to help streamline and automate a lot of things that we're doing. I use it for writing formulas in Excel to help streamline my workbooks. I have tons of workbooks, but I've used it to create some really cool formulas. I had no idea. It would take me years, right, to try to figure that out, and years of practice to try to figure out how to do that back in the day. I mean, had I had this back in the day, maybe I wouldn't be doing tax anymore. But now that I have this tool, like, wow, I didn't realize this formula existed. That's really, really neat. So technology leveraging off of that is certainly another priority for us. And then collaboration, just making sure that we're collaborating with our business partners, legal, HR, security, right, around all the things that we're doing as a company, and making sure that from a tax perspective that we can be adding value to our core function and making sure that we're paying our fair share of taxes in these various jurisdictions. So those are the priorities.
I love the concept of collaboration. It's like a key theme for me. And my experience working in especially technology firms, making sure that my tax team was, fully integrated with the product team so that we could make sure that, the right data was being collected in order to be able to make sure we could, be compliant and file, tax returns, sales tax, et cetera, correctly was very key. So what are some of your strategies to help your team be seen as partners?
Yeah, no, it really is being present. It is walking around. It's great that we have a hybrid work policy where we're in the office at least 3 days a week. And so it's walking around, it's getting to know people in the various groups. Like, what are you working on? Sitting down with the revenue team to see how they are accounting for revenue in various jurisdictions. Do they have billing entities? We're working with the product team, as you mentioned, understanding what products are coming out, where we're going to be releasing those products in various countries. And on day one, when I got to OpenAI, again, because ChatGPT was really taking off, I was sitting in there with a bunch of executives that said, we're going to go in all these countries, and we're going to be selling in all these countries. I said, oh, I just started. You tell them you're going to turn on tax in all these countries, so I need to account for VAT, I need to register for VAT, right? We're going to have to start charging it to our customers, but can our billing system actually charge that out in the jurisdictions, right? We may not even be able to turn it on. And so if it's working with those vendors to be sure that we can be compliant, and if not, then we potentially need it up to be reserved. And it's sitting with the finance team and letting them know that, okay, we are going into 100 countries, but we're not going to be compliant here and there, so we need to set up some reserves. So to your point about collaboration, it's just trying to be present and trying to be engaged with various folks. I try to make sure that our tax team is a very open, friendly, engaging, personable team. And so I think there's a lot of other teams that, oh, your tax team is really nice to work with and collaborative. And so I always try to pride myself on that to make sure that I do have that seat at the table, the voice, have lunch, go out for coffee, those types of things to get to know people. And building relationships is super important for me in the development in my career and for the rest of us on the tax team.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I feel like, that personal interaction and building relationships, I used to make my teams, assign a team member to each different group, and they had to go be buddies because, then you could work well together and know what was going on. And it really helped, with that, to have a, more collaborative environment, which avoids problems down the road. So
yeah,
that's great. And can you talk a little bit more about, the concept of balancing growth initiatives with sound tax governance?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's just to your point, is having a seat at the table, getting tax involved early. If legal is working on particular deals, make sure that you get involved with them because they're gonna have first window of what's going on with anything substantial in the company, whether it's restructuring, whether it's M&A. And so it's getting to know them and just doing that early. And then for tax in particular, given all the initiatives that have been coming out, you guys probably heard about Pillar 2 and all of the international OECD initiatives that have been coming out. It's just getting ahead of it and trying to plan for it and trying to build that muscle internally. To think about that, we're going into a bunch of different countries, hiring in these different countries, setting up legal entities. What does that mean? So it's trying to get to it early, although, with the growth that we've had, it's been difficult to be able to dedicate all that time, which is why, we need to try to continue to grow out a team or rely more so on outside advisors. But it's a balance, and we try to get ahead of it as much as possible. And it is not top of mind, but it's something that we just need to make sure that we are thinking about it. So in our weekly tax meetings, or team meetings, we certainly do talk about things that we should be concerned about in the near future.
Okay. So what about metrics? What kinds of metrics or KPIs should CFOs be tracking? What should we be thinking about as we do our day-to-day?
Yeah, I'm going to throw a few to you, Heather, and see if, as you were working with tax folks, if those resonated. Because with the CFOs that I've worked with, the effective tax rate is always top of mind. Like, oh, there are ETR that goes on financials, right? So, and how do you balance that out against a statutory tax rate? Because that will tell you whether or not you are optimizing your tax function. Or back in the day when I was working for Google, right, we had offshore a bunch of IP. We were setting up our foreign structure, and that helped us reduce our corporate tax rate when the U.S. federal tax rate was at 35%. Much lower rates in Ireland with a 12.5% tax rate. But now with the U.S. tax rate at 21% federal, there's not as much play, you're not having as much IP migration outside the U.S. There's no major rate arbitrage. Plus, with Pillar 2 coming out with 15% global minimum tax, you may be limiting the amount of international tax planning that you want to do. ETR certainly is top of mind for CFOs. Cash taxes paid is big, right? So I have trackers that I keep for our CFO, which lists out all the cash taxes that we paid for the year, our anticipated tax expense for the year. So you can just go into that dashboard, look and see, oh, okay, how's the tax department doing? What did they pay so far? What are they expecting to pay? Here are the by line item what the items are. So
So
That's number two.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because I think
Yeah.
some people are having a hard time, hearing you clearly.
Oh.
It's like you're cutting in and out. Do you
Maybe
mind?
I'll
Yeah.
turn off my video. Sorry about that.
No worries, guys. Let me know if it's better. So let's keep going, Nick. Thank you very much for trying that. So.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Is that better?
I think so, but let's see. We'll move forward and we'll see.
Nick, it's still a little garbly. Sorry.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize about that.
No worries.
Should I try calling in?
Yeah, that might make sense. Yeah, can you call in from the number?
Okay, let me do that.
It got a little worse.
Okay,
It was
I'll call
okay.
back in.
I didn't say
Yeah, because
You
now
guys
it's
can
really
talk about
bad.
it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did we jinx him?
Yeah.
I
So
think
Heather,
so.
Heather, you know what is a place where technology doesn't work mostly?
Tell
Silicon
me
Valley.
where?
In Silicon Valley.
In Silicon Valley. Oh, funny. I haven't heard that one, but I'm going to use it. So
So from what you've seen, Heather, I mean, let's just talk about it. Like, what do you think are the CFO's big tax concern?
Well, I think I think it depends. My answer to every question always starts with it, and it depends, right, on what your goal is. I agree with him. Effective tax rates are really good to look at because it gives you some information about how you're doing in terms of your tax planning. Because we know a lot of companies do set up their companies, and they structure their businesses in a way, and they locate their businesses in a way to take advantage of certain tax vehicles that are helpful for their company. So it's a good way to be able to tell how you're doing versus if you were doing nothing at all. I think I'm interested to hear, some more of the things that Nick thinks, are good metrics, for people to think about, as they're looking at their tax department and their corporate tax. One of the things I'm also interested to talk to him about is how companies can use can leverage their tax planning for cash management, right? Because that's one of the things. I don't know about everyone else, and I don't know about your companies, but we consult. We have about 90 clients, and I cannot tell you how many clients are having cash runway problems, right? And so it's one of the things that we come in to try to help companies, solve for. So it'd be interesting to see, how tax planning and can be part of the solution.
I'm back on. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yay,
Okay.
you're crystal clear.
Yay, is that better? I'm not garbly?
You are perfect.
Okay,
You're
gosh.
perfect. Garbly,
You're
or whatever the
perfect,
word we
yes.
use.
Okay, I don't like being garbly.
Okay. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about the metrics that we should be tracking.
Yeah.
Or if okay, so I'll just let you continue.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I'm not sure how much everybody caught on that when I started off. So effective tax rate, for sure.
Yeah. I
Cash
just killed
taxes
that
paid.
one. I just killed
Okay.
the effective tax rate, so
Okay.
you can move forward with something else.
Okay, cash taxes paid, you got that one, right? Being able to track our outflows, making tax payments as minimum amount as possible, so you don't incur underpayment penalties, right? So for us at OpenAI, obviously explosive growth, some of our taxes were going to skyrocket, but because of only needing to pay based on prior year liability, we can keep that, and making those estimated payments as such based on the prior year liability instead of what we're anticipating, right? So you're going to have a large payment when you file the return later on, but that's not for another year once that return is due. So, consider that. Return to provision adjustment. So, estimate your income tax provision as best you can, certainly with the level of expertise that you're bringing in to the tax function. You want to prepare it as if you're preparing your tax return, right, with all the various adjustments. So then when the return is filed, minimum surprise there, minimum true ups, minimum additional expense once that's done. So the CFOs that I've worked with have always been very keen on what the returns look like versus what we've estimated. And because they don't like to be caught by a surprise, right, with the filings. And then if we're having audits, tax audits, and I think a lot of countries, a lot of tax jurisdictions that are out there are gonna, especially coming out of the pandemic, just make sure that they're super aggressive with trying to recoup lost revenue, to enforce and throw out more auditors in the field to audit taxpayers. So that's going to be key. I think one metric that I had with the CFOs is, here the number of open audits that we have, here's the potential exposure we could have. And then as one of my OKRs, I'm going to close half of them with, let's say, a 10% delta on the exposure that I've quantified. So something like that, I think, is key. And I have that in my dashboard for our current CFO. And then if you're in a loss, right, if you have, or if you're with a company that has NOLs, tracking the NOLs and when you'll be able to utilize those NOLs, it goes into your footnote disclosure. It's something that's usually top of mind for CFOs that I've seen. So I've usually modeled that out. When we'll be able to utilize that, getting projections from the FP&A team to see when we'll become profitable to when we can utilize those NOLs. So those are some of the key metrics there that I work with CFOs on.
So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that companies face when they do have those cross-border tax compliance issues?
Yeah, we're dealing with that a lot now, and I've dealt with that at a lot of the other companies. It's really getting your arms around transfer pricing. And you constantly, I remember when I first started my career, I heard transfer pricing. What does that really mean? And everybody said, oh, it's arm's length. To me, the way that I look at it is, are you paying your, it goes back to, are you paying your fair share of taxes in that jurisdiction? Because again, tax authorities are going to be really aggressive, and they're assuming if you're going to be doing business in their jurisdiction, that you are paying the right amount of tax. So with that, it's making sure you have sufficient presence to, and then really understanding your business operations in that jurisdiction so that you are reporting the correct amount of tax. And then having intercompany agreements around that and working closely with the legal team, the product team, and making sure that you have all those particular terms within the intercompany agreements that will support the profits that you are going to be having in those jurisdictions. And then when you prepare your audited financial statements in those jurisdictions, that should line up, and transfer pricing can help dictate what goes into those audited financial statements. So I think that's one of the bigger items, certainly. And with BEPS and Pillar 2, I just went to a conference in New York last week, and it was top of mind for everybody, like all the different companies I was talking to. And there's so much uncertainty because you have 140 plus OECD countries that have signed up for it and are going to enact that in their legislation, but they're all doing it at different times. So as a US headquartered company, how are you being impacted by it, and how do you model out for it? It's incredibly complex and challenging for any tax function to fully understand it. And you hear all these acronyms that are being thrown out there, and you have no idea what they mean. To me, as I take a step back, it's just a 15% global minimum tax that you're going to be paying in all the jurisdictions essentially that you're doing business in, and look at it that way. They have all these different concepts and terms that get thrown in there, and all these crazy calculations that go into it. But I think that's, just trying to get your arms around that is going to be challenging for companies. And I think that's something that we're going to be focusing on as a company, and certainly as you start exceeding certain revenue thresholds, you're going to have additional compliance requirements. There's going to be country by country reporting, master files, local files, public disclosure situations in some jurisdictions, like in the UK. If you exceed a certain revenue threshold, you actually have to disclose your tax strategy. And we had to do that at some private companies as well. So those are some of the biggest challenges that we've had to face with the companies that I've been at.
Got it. So let's come back to some of the things that have been happening. And I don't know, there's a lot of changes going on, but how should CFOs really think about tax compliance for their remote and hybrid workforces? I know this is something that since the pandemic, really became like a big hot button issue. Yeah, so give me your take on how CFOs should be looking at that and thinking about that. Maybe it won't be an issue anymore. Maybe everybody will have to go back and
I know, yeah, but it is a tough one because we have employees that are going from state to state. During the pandemic, you had a bunch of nomads that really didn't have a residency. So what do you tax them? It still was just going back to their initial state of residency that a lot of companies were asserting for payroll tax purposes. But with a bunch of companies that I've talked to, and even with the companies that I've worked at, usually a 30-day work outside of your state policy has been established. And even the tracking mechanism can be difficult. So even if you have an employee who's been working more than 30 days outside of their home state, I mean, do you tax that person? Because there's administrative burden on both the employee and the employer. And so you kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. Me as the head of tax at OpenAI for a bit, I was just trying to be lenient with the employees and just telling them that the state of California, if you're working there one day, if you're living in New York, you're coming to California, you could be taxed.
Yep.
Now it's an extreme case, but they could, right? And so we just throw it out there, but we were also just trying to make sure that we had a good employee experience. But we're not going to tax you for California. But if California were to come knocking, what we'll do is, we can issue you another W-2, right? That shows California and New York withholding, right? Based on the number of days you work in California. And we can at least help you with that. So you'll have to probably file a tax return in California, pay taxes there, get a credit from what you paid in New York. We haven't had those situations yet, thank goodness. And a lot of the other companies that I've talked to have not had that issue, but it's something that a lot of companies are talking about. And in some cases, like in New York, I think they have like a 14 or 15-day work in the state policy before withholding can begin. Companies are trying to take a more strict approach with employees and just telling them, if you're going to work in New York at our office here, we're going to start withholding if you are there for more than 14 days. We can track where you are based on badge data. But honor system as well. Just let us know if you're going to be approaching it, and then we can start thinking about it, have the conversation before we actually do start withholding. But it's a tricky one. I mean, we can certainly err on the side of tax, right, and just be really, really strict with that. But I don't think it's the best employee experience.
Got it. Well, we are at time. So yeah, which is too bad because I wanted to talk about one more thing, but that's okay. I'll circle back with you, offline. So, but thank you so much for sharing with us around the wonderful world of tax. I think we do, is it a break right now, Josette, or is it intros?
It's break time. So let's do a 3
Right,
minute.
let's do it.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I got to do 2.
Yeah, you got to do a couple of intros.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, so Matthew Levine, are you back? There
I
you
am.
are. There you go.
Yes.
Okay. Spotlighting you.
Yeah, I'll be super quick. Very nice to meet everyone. Very happy to be here. My name's Matt Levine, currently living in Raleigh, North Carolina. So wish I could be on the West Coast hanging out with everyone. I started my career in public accounting at Deloitte, and then went to Salesforce and was there for about 5.5 years in the revenue department. Made a pretty large shift and jump into a CFO role at a startup company. So very excited, have so much to learn, and I love being a part of this because although I probably can't contribute as much as most people at this point, just really looking to learn. And kind of on that note, my superpower is, I think, adaptability, being able to be in a new surrounding, a new place, and soak up all that learning and take it into action. So thank you so much, everyone.
That's great. I'm glad that you're joining us from North Carolina. It's getting quite late out there. All right. And finally, Sonia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sonia Mansour. I am Director of Internal Audit at Corsair Gaming, a public company. A little bit of my background, I started my career with PwC. I was there as an external auditor for about 4 or 5 years. Then I went into revenue accounting with Seagate Technologies back when they were in Scotts Valley. In Silicon Valley, with that area for the people that are not in California. And then I moved over to Corsair, where I've pretty much done anything accounting, finance related. And most recently with this role, I pioneered the SOX 404 implementation at Corsair. So I resonate with a lot of what Chanpreet was saying. It's kind of my day-to-day job these days. And I mean, I did the implementation of SOX, and now I lead essentially maintaining it and internal audit as well. A superpower, I think, probably I would say I'm a problem solver. I'm a big believer that there's always a solution or an answer, more than one solution or answer to anything, any question or any problems in life. And it's just a matter of finding it. And, sometimes we hit a roadblock. You just kind of have to change gears and find another solution. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Sonia. Glad that you're with us. All right. Heather, back over to you.
All righty. Okay. So we're now going into the Treasury section, and I have Dan from Wells Fargo, who's going to take us through all the things we should be thinking about when it comes to Treasury as CFOs. So you can introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah, I'll be quick. And then Josette, do we want to do the polling questions after I introduce myself? Or?
Yeah, get them out of the way. Those are the last 2 polling questions.
Okay. All right. So yeah, Dan Sanchez, Wells Fargo Bank. Been in the banking industry for 25 years. Some familiar faces on the screen here. I've done everything from small and privately held companies. Worked with Ed Murphy at a startup bank a number of years ago, to global 500 companies, Fortune 1000 companies. The last 10 years really focused on public companies, kind of in the Fortune 1000 space. We're currently working with nothing but technology companies in the semi space, software, and a little bit of fintech. And have experience working with companies implementing Treasury in Latin America, Asia, and Europe, as well as here domestically. So happy to be here, and we'll cover this efficiently. So I guess we can get to the polling questions.
All right, let me put the polling questions up. We're going to ask these 2 at the same time. So Kristen, I'm going to pop them up here. Oh wait, hang on a second. You can see the questions, and there we go. There we go. So you should see 2 questions on your screen. So Kristen, are you there? Let's see. They're easy questions. So rate your knowledge, exposure and experience related to Treasury issues, all the way from 1 is none, and 5 is very knowledgeable. And then in your current company, please select the treasurer's responsibilities and select all applicable items. Okay. All right. So closing the poll in 5 seconds. Let's get those answers in. The last 2 polling questions. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll and sharing the results. There we go. You guys see that? Let's So average to above average knowledgeable group, it seems like. That means you might get some hard questions, Dan. And then in terms of the last question, the most responses went to cash and liquidity management and payments and bank account management, followed by the others. So hopefully is that useful? All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back to you guys. I'll take the slides down. And there you go.
All righty. Well, I can't really tell from the poll whether, because, you know, we had one of the questions was if you used to have a treasury function in a prior company. So I'm not sure if everyone has a treasury function at their company, but, you know, we know that some companies don't actually have a formal treasury department or treasurer. And so those responsibilities do fall to the CFO's office. So, if indeed those treasury responsibilities are part of the CFO's organization, what are some of the top priorities?
Yeah, I think that's fairly common in Silicon Valley as well, right? Especially for the growth stage companies and certainly for the early stage companies where the CFO is really the treasurer, or even in some public companies where the VP finance and others are kind of sharing that role of treasury. So I would say from a priority standpoint and some of the key things, the first would be cash and liquidity management. Understanding kind of your cash position, your 13-week cash forecast, managing liquidity, managing the cash, either if you're a company that's burning cash, or even a industrial company that is managing cash for CapEx purposes or other investment needs. And that would include kind of visibility, as I mentioned, into the 13-week forecast and a 6-month forecast and even an annual forecast, where you are able to have visibility into what your cash flow position is now, but also what you expect that cash flow position to be over the foreseeable, the short term and the medium term, right? Which is important for a lot of companies. You want to make sure that you have adequate liquidity to operate. If you have constituencies that you are managing, you want to make sure, if you're a public company, for example, you want to make sure that you're keeping enough liquidity. I have clients, a number of clients who have benchmarks for what they want to report from a cash and liquidity standpoint every quarter, and so that's kind of key. The second, which goes to, I think, the polling question, is bank and bank account management and asset manager account management. So you want to make sure that from a CFO perspective that you have good relationships with those institutions. We'll get into the discussion about multiple banks and asset managers, but you want to make sure that you have good relationships there, that you're managing not only from a cost perspective, but I think from a product and service perspective, to make sure that you are keeping up to date with the products and services that are out there. Because you may not have a treasury and you may not have a treasury department, you want to make sure that you're keeping things efficient and that you're using all of the products that can allow you to be effective with a short staff. Same on the asset management side. If you're cash, if you've got a lot of cash and you're managing that cash, you want to make sure that you have really good relationships with those asset managers and are understanding what the fees are, understanding what your returns are, making sure that everybody's kind of on the same page in terms of the investment policy. And then I would say the third thing is kind of falls into the risk management area, and a couple of areas there. Foreign exchange and currency being one, understanding what the risks are if you're selling internationally and globally. If you've got cost centers or offices in other locations, what that currency risk is. I think if you're a company that's borrowing cash or borrowing money, I think Champreet mentioned it earlier, understanding the debt covenants and the covenant structure and the things you can do and the things you can't do. I just got through with putting together a credit facility. It's a 207-page credit agreement. There's a lot of stuff in there. And you want to make sure that you kind of understand what things you can do and what things you can't do, and you don't want to jeopardize any of that by doing something that is not allowed by the credit agreement. And then I would say the last thing on that risk management, and there are other things, but I think the other one that's more prominent is fraud and security. We're seeing a lot of fraud and a lot of cyber risk. Clients, everything from wires going out or ACH payments going out, everything that's done electronically, there's a risk that there could be fraud there. And so really kind of making sure that you have a handle on that. You've got policies in place, that you've got dual controls, and those sorts of things are really kind of important.
So, yeah, so I'm going to just ask you a follow-up question that somebody raised. And it's around the cash forecast. Now, I know that last year my partner Eric, did this, and I think he partnered with you on this. And one of our big things is we always make sure our clients have a cash forecast. It's always shocking to us that people don't.
Yes.
And so the question was, when do you need to have a cash forecast in place? Let me just read the question completely. So I make sure, At what point do you recommend companies begin implementing a 13-week cash flow forecast? And do you view this as relevant for startups with significant cash cushions?
Yes, and I would say that you should do that as you should start that as early as you can. Because I think that's just important, even if you have a big cash cushion, right? I mean, if you have a company who goes out and raises $100 million in cash and is only burning a few $1 million a month, it's important to have that for discipline purposes, one, and second, because you just want to make sure that you have some sort of idea as to what is happening with that cash, and whether you're what that visibility looks like. 13 weeks, 6 months, you can change the intervals. Maybe for a startup that has that much, maybe it's not a 13-week, maybe it's a quarter or 2 quarters, or in that range. For some companies, I have clients that operate on a monthly cash forecast, so it's not 13 weeks. It's every month. So I would recommend that you do that as soon as possible, no matter what stage of company you're at, and wherever you are in the life cycle.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And having that visibility to, what your cash runway is like, super important, because as things change, and the company starts trying to do different things, it's helpful to know that information as well. So I would agree. All right. So let's move on to what best practices related to optimal cash balance considerations and cash generation should CFOs be considering?
Yeah, I think I was actually talking to a CFO about this last week, and I think and this is given where interest rates are, and we'll cover this in a bit, but I think the cash conversion cycle and the efficiency of that cash conversion cycle is something that I think the best CFOs are really kind of focused on. That's your receivables turn, your payables turn. If you have inventory, your inventory turn, working capital management metrics, inventory management, all those things, so that you have a good sense of how quickly your sales are converting to cash, and kind of understanding that, and understanding where things can slow down and where you can be effective from a cash standpoint are kind of key. And I think the best companies, Nick mentioned a company I covered Matson for a number of years, and that finance team there, Joel and Ben, had a lot of metrics about that cash conversion cycle and how quickly they could turn a sale into cash. And I think that's really kind of important when you think about those things we talked about a few minutes ago in terms of forecasting and visibility. So I would say that's one of the key things there. Depending on the life cycle of your company, if you're a company that's burning cash, but maybe generating revenue, again, understanding kind of how quickly you're getting paid and then how quickly you're paying out is kind of important. With a lot of companies, we spend a lot of time kind of, the question comes up about what's my optimal cash balance? What should I be keeping in cash? We spend a lot of time with them, and there's, depending on the industry, you can look at peers, you can look at where they're at in the life cycle, and a lot of quantitative things that all the banks should be able to help you with in terms of letting you benchmark, or giving you benchmarks that you should be thinking about. In today's world, free cash flow is a big consideration. If you listen to any public earnings calls, a lot of discussion about free cash flow and whether you're generating free cash flow. And so those metrics are important as well.
Got it. So how about priorities related to cash management? How are they changing in this current environment of higher interest rates, higher cost of capital? You and I kind of chatted about this earlier. So, what cash investment and cash management strategies, should CFOs be focused on in different stages of companies and industry?
Yeah. 3-4 years ago, I think this wasn't a hot topic because everybody was getting 0% interest.
Exactly, right? Free cash.
So nobody was really paying attention to it. Now that you're, up until a week ago, companies were getting 5%, 5.25%, and it became a meaningful part of income. And so the importance of being able to optimize cash, going back to that cash conversion cycle efficiency, being able to turn those sales into cash that allowed you to invest it, whether it be in a sweep account at a bank or whether it be with an asset manager, that kind of productivity of cash was important because it was generating not an insignificant amount of income. So those are I think the major considerations that I think that have kind of changed. I think even in the rate environment we're in now, I don't think anybody expects that we're going to go back to 0% interest anytime soon. So even at 4% or 3.5%, it's still a meaningful number. So I think people being able to focus on what they can get, that productivity of their cash and liquidity is going to be key. And I suspect that that'll continue in the foreseeable future.
And what about the flip side of that, for people who are borrowing?
Cost of capital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the other part of that as well. Became more expensive to borrow money. And I think from a debt perspective, interest rates spiked up really quickly. That was a huge impact to some companies from a debt service standpoint. So I think, again, to the extent that you can convert your cash quickly, particularly if you're borrowing on a revolving basis, and be able to pay down your debt and be able to minimize your interest expense, that can only help you from a profit and loss perspective and an EBITDA perspective.
Yeah, no, that's good advice.
Yeah.
So somebody mentioned this, and we'll just go back to this ugly topic. So it's been now over a year since the SVB and First Republic, I will call it a debacle, but we experienced some of the pain from that as well. So how are you seeing banking relationships evolving for companies over this past year?
Yeah, I think things have kind of settled down. But I think obviously when that first happened, there was a flight of capital and a lot of concern and people wondering, whether they were covered by FDIC insurance, whether they were not covered by FDIC insurance. Should they have multiple banks? Should they have multiple asset managers? Where should they put their cash? Those sorts of things. I think it's calmed down a little bit, but I do think there are some things that have come out that were positives from that experience. I think more and more companies, we get it, and at Wells Fargo, more and more companies are asking questions about our credit rating, our products, whether they're insured or not insured.
Yes.
Who's the counterparty risk? You put money in a sweep account. Who's the counterparty risk? What happens if there's a failure? How do I get my cash out? Is it a pooled account? Is it an individual account? If I have money invested through Wells Fargo or JP Morgan at BlackRock or Fidelity, is my counterparty risk Fidelity, or is it still the bank? I think they're asking questions about not only Wells Fargo and the larger institutions, but also the regionals and the community banks. And I think, frankly, I think a lot of companies have gone to having multiple bank relationships where they only were in previous years, they only had one relationship. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think, if it makes sense and you can do it in an efficient way, it certainly not having your eggs in one basket is certainly a consideration that you should be thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think that it's, going to add one more thing, on term sheets, for people to pay attention to, because I remember when we were getting a huge, debt facility, we would have to move all of our banking to the bank that we were doing that business with. And I think people will be that will be one of those items you never used to try to negotiate, that people would start trying to negotiate. So it's going to change the way, it is changing the way people are doing business.
Yeah. The last thing I'll mention there, Heather, too, is we have seen a lot of companies, and these are public companies or PE-backed companies who have really kind of reviewed their investment policy, and not only have changed their investment policy or have investment policy guidelines in there about the kind of instruments they can invest in, but some of them are putting in limits about how much cash they can keep at any one institution. So I know I have a client that their investment policy explicitly says that they should only keep no more than $30 million at one financial institution. Even though they have, a few $100 million of cash. So, and they're not the only ones. We've seen that from others as well, just to kind of spread the risk around.
The risk. Yeah. Makes sense. All right. Well, my last question for you is, so while operational treasury management is important, how can strategic treasury management assist CFOs and companies?
Yeah, so operational treasury, we talked about that in terms of managing the bank relationship, and your collections, your payments, those sorts of things, which is key on the operational side to make sure that you're converting sales to cash in the most efficient manner. I think one of the things that I see, having worked with non-technology companies and now focusing only on technology companies, is that at least with technology companies, is that strategic kind of treasury is not always, and it probably a function of the lack of staff, is not always kind of at the forefront. And I would say that particularly for companies that are acquisitive, companies that are growing, I think that strategy is really not only around the collection side of it, but also on the debt side of it, right? And Adam talked about it last week in terms of the different products that are available. But I think companies that are proactive in terms of seeking and talking to banks about the various capital raising alternatives and understanding what the process is are at an advantage versus a company who doesn't. I mean, I can't tell you. I'll give you just a couple of stories. A company came to us last year making a $450 million acquisition, had already made their bid, and then came to us and were asking about the financing. It's a lot more difficult to put that in place and to talk about the convertible debt market and talk about whether it was the high yield market or the institutional term B market and a revolver. Starting that discussion from scratch.
Yeah.
Alternatively, about 4 months ago, a company who had every 6 months was meeting with us and asking us hey, what does a convert market look for us like? look for us like in today's market. What's available to us on an institutional basis in the term B market? What's the pro rata bank market look like for us, right? And we would share with them like, well, this is kind of where you fit. This is what you can think about. This is kind of the capacity you have. When they came out and were making a $200 million acquisition, it's a relatively easy process to put that debt in place and the funding in place for them to get it. Partly because they kind of understood after having discussions, and they didn't only have discussions with Wells Fargo, they had discussions with other banks as well, because they kind of understood what they could get, and they kind of understand what the market was. They kind of understood what the market was for them. It's a lot easier to do it a lot easier to do it that way than waiting until you have a deal in place and you've got to close something in 90 days.
Exactly.
So that's from a strategic standpoint. And the same can be said of FX if you're making an acquisition overseas, and some of the other issues that can bring about.
Got it. All right. Well, I feel like we're at time, aren't we, Josette?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry about that, guys. We're 2 minutes over. You know, I just want to say one thing, which is that I think there's some recurring themes. Thank you so much, Dan, that went across all of the areas, which is, you know, collaboration and communication, right? So I think, you know, CFOs, if they're doing their job properly, you're helping the company see around corners, you're anticipating things, and you're communicating. And, you know, you can avoid a lot of pitfalls along the way across all of these different areas if you're, you know, having conversations and you're, you know, thinking about what could happen down the road and not just, you know, being reactive. So I think this was a great session. I'm biased, but thank you so much, Josette. This has been so much fun. I hope everyone who attended got some great information out of it. And I'm going to give it back to you, Josette, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. And we really appreciate you moderating and running through all the issues of everybody. I think Champreet is here. Thank you, Champreet, for sharing your insights. And I think Nick and Quad and some of the others have left. So
no, Nick is here. Thank
there
you.
you are, Nick. Thank you, Nick. I didn't see you there. Thank you so much. And Chris,
thanks,
thank
guys.
you for helping us organize everything. We appreciate seeing everybody. We'll get the video and all the other stuff up on the website and grab the survey, and we'll see everybody next week. Have a good one.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.
Good night.